Is Choo-Choo Charles a ripoff?
It's him! It's him! Get to the gun! Light him up! Light him up! Don't let the gun
No, it isn't. It's awesome. You get a call from your old friend Eugene. The two of you used to hunt monsters together back in the day, but it's been years since you last spoke. Apparently, he's become the supervisor of a mining operation that's uncovered a dark secret. Animatronics, the island where miners dig their own graves. Run by the vicious proprietor Warren Charles III, a cruel man who works his staff to death. Oddly enough, the workers and their families live on the island, almost like peasants. However, with the monstrous Charles prowling the island, devouring its residents, things have begun to fall apart. Some turn to God for salvation. Others form a resistance committed to toppling Warren and saving the island's people. Others have lost their minds and have become cultists under Warren's control, worshipping Charles. As a former monster hunter and the curator of a museum of oddities, you jump at the opportunity and the two of you set sail for Animatronics. Upon arriving, Eugene directs us to the game's main mode of transport, the train. The island is huge, but we can quickly explore it using a combination of our steam engine and the main railroad switches scattered throughout Animatronics. However, throughout the night we're stalked by Charles, a man-eating spider train. As we putter down the tracks and complete missions, haunting steam horns blare in the distance. They get closer and closer, and eventually we start to catch glimpses of the demon train on the horizon. Inevitably, Charles will pounce, and when he does, it's awesome. The music swells up and gets intense. You bolt for your train and fire up the engine before sprinting to your gun and shooting for dear life. Eventually, after taking enough damage, Charles will run away, but he'll be back, and it's up to you to get as much done as possible before then. Charles is fast, and if you're caught out on foot, you're probably gonna be derailed. I read that I need to better incentivize my viewers to subscribe, so subscribe or you're going to die. You and Eugene take your train for a spin, but Charles quickly attacks.
It's him! Get to the gun!
We man our machine gun and start peppering the evil train with bullets, but Eugene is knocked into the air and onto the tracks. Our hail of gunfire scares Charles away, but when we go to check on our dear friend Eugene, we find that Charles has eviscerated his bowels.
This isn't how things were supposed to end. Find the eggs. Find my son. And you can help an old friend. We can light up Charles with it and take him down before he even sees us coming. We're coming for you, Charles!
Then I ran him over with my train because I wanted to see what would happen. It was sort of underwhelming. This is where Choo-Choo Charles really opens up and where the game really begins. As we cruised down the coastline, I couldn't help but be impressed by just how good the game looks. It doesn't have AAA graphics like some have suggested, but it was unrealistic to expect that from a solo indie dev to begin with. Oh yeah, did I mention that this entire game was primarily developed by a single person? Upon reaching the first switch, we hop out, activate it, and then head inland towards Tony Tittle's shack and the first of our 3 objective types, optional quests. These reward us with the game's primary collectible resource, scrap, which we can use to restore our train's health, as well as upgrade its weapons, armor, and speed. I chose to prioritize the train's speed, as there aren't terrible consequences for death in Choo-Choo Charles, and being able to traverse the map faster is always nice. Weapon quests unlock a new weapon for use against Charles. You want to prioritize these because all weapons have a cooldown period after prolonged use. The more weapons you have, the easier it is to quickly grab another one and get back into the action. Furthermore, Charles isn't the only enemy you'll come across. Throughout the island are cultists under the employ of Warren who seem to worship Charles. Sometimes you'll come across them on foot when you're defenseless, but other times your train will roll up to a cultist stronghold. And having more weapons on your train gives you more ways to deal with them. Finally, there are the essential story missions that progress the plot. After looting Tony Tittle's shack, we encounter the Pickle Lady.
I need my pickles! I ate the last jar of pickles I had in my house, and there's only 1 jar of pickles left on the island!
Unfortunately, we don't have any lockpicks with which to open the pickle chest in the pickle cave, so we'll need to return here later. I did, however, find some purple paint for our train, and I'm somewhat of a purple guy these days, so I painted our train purple. I think it's pretty. It was at this moment that I realized Choo-Choo Charles is perhaps the first ever indie horror game that lets you ghost ride the whip.
Ghost ride the whip. Ghost ride the whip.
I headed back to the switch, but this time continued along the coastline until I encountered Candace. She's a nice lady who offers us some scrap metal that's in her house. I think this was intended to be the first mission, but whatever. After collecting the scrap, I headed further inland and found a swamp with Lizbeth Murkwater, who is a witch. Like a straight up witch with a pointy hat and a cauldron and everything. Girl, if you a witch, why not cast some spells on Charles or something?
I'll pay you some scraps, although you'll need to be wary of Barry, the swamp monster.
The fuck you say about a swamp monster? We dive into the lake and begin approaching the island. Then a big fish eats us. So it turns out you have to watch for the bubbles in the water and only move when they're far enough away. If you do move while they're too close, you get nommed. Once I figured this out though, it wasn't too bad, just time consuming. It reminded me a bit of the infamous water demon from Amnesia: The Dark Descent. It makes you panic in the same way.
What a delicacy you found!
After leaving the swamp, we head back to our train and use our scrap to buy some more upgrades. We come across a junkyard full of dead trains, and naturally we're able to find a bunch of scrap lying around. Afterwards, we head into Daryl's shack for another mission.
Look, kid, I know you're supposed to be some fancy-pants monster hunter, but you can't earn my respect without making yourself useful. I got some lockpicks, but I don't know how to use them.
Lockpicks in hand, we head to the crate, grabbing some more scrap along the way. The lockpicking minigame is fine, the timing is a bit tight, but nothing we can't handle. More important is that we now have lockpicks, which will prove essential in completing other missions, including the Pickle Ladies.
I need my pickles!
Next door is Helen, who gives us our first story mission.
The monster hunter has arrived, I see. We've already tried fighting Charles, but he retreats into the wilderness if he is sufficiently harmed. We believe there may be a way to get Charles to commit to a mortal battle, however. Dispersed around the island are 3 eggs. Our theory is that putting these eggs in the temple at the center of the island will provoke Charles into a fight to the death. There's an egg in the mine just down the rail.
With the key to the mine in hand, we begin heading down the road, but stop to tackle a weapon mission. However, rather than go talk to the mission giver, I just went and turned this valve, which was apparently all I needed to do in order to complete the mission. To the game's credit, it handled this sequence break fine. I was given a prompt to go complete the mission, and I unlocked the flamethrower. Some games might make it so that the valve wasn't interactable until you've spoken to the mission giver, but I think letting the player sequence break it is a lot cooler. Now, we have the bug spray, a short-ranged flamethrower that overheats very quickly, but I mean, come on, it's a flamethrower, it's awesome. We head over to the mine to find the first of Charles' eggs, and we find a note from our friend Eugene, addressed to the mine's owner, Warren Charles. Progressing even further into the mine, we encounter a locked crate, and after picking it open, we obtain the green paint can. I still prefer purple, but the completionist in me is definitely thrilled that we found this. The mine gives way to a cave system, and it actually looks quite nice. I'm continually stunned that this is an indie game made by like one person. Without our trusty train, we're defenseless, and the mines are full of patrolling cultists guarding the egg. We need to use the game's rudimentary stealth mechanics to sneak by them, grab it, and escape. Unfortunately, on my way out, I got spotted by a cultist, and one down, 2 to go. It was at this point that I discovered the game's waypoint system. You can right-click the map to set a waypoint wherever you want, which is handy. Unfortunately, there's no way to unset the waypoint, and as a YouTuber who wanted to capture clean, pretty footage of the game without a giant waypoint getting in my way, it was sort of annoying. We meet Theodore, who needs us to retrieve some belongings of his that's fallen into the hands of Charles' cultists. We head up to their camp, grab the box, and bail. On one hand, the game's stealth mechanics haven't really been necessary. You have enough health that you can kind of just ignore the enemies and beeline it to your destination, but on the other hand, I almost prefer this to a really difficult stealth system that gets frustrating and has you replaying the same sequences over and over again. One thing I think that would improve the stealth system is that the enemies stay aggroed to you for way too long. This one dude followed me all the way back from the cultists' camp and back to the train station. I turned in the mission, and when I went to leave, he was standing right outside. It did at least give me an opportunity to do this, which was awesome. At this point, I happened to be near the pickle cave, so I returned and used the lockpicks to obtain said pickles. I returned them to the pickle lady, who raised me to peerage, dubbing me the pickle hero.
My pickles!
Unfortunately, I found myself very, very far from our train. I began the long journey back when I began to hear some unsettling sounds in the distance. After being thoroughly derailed, we continue to tackle some other optional missions. Some are typical fetch quests, but others are more involved and interesting. One in particular has us moving through a wooded area searching for 8 pages pinned to trees in an obvious homage to Slender. This sequence is really cool and pretty intense actually. The ghost has some neat visual effects, and if it gets too close, it teleports you out of the area. As we collect more pages, the ghost becomes faster and more aggressive. I was having trouble finding the last couple until I realized that I could stand along the edges of the area outside the ghost's range and just search for the pages from above. After turning in a few more quests, we head up to the northeast corner of the island, where a weapon and story mission await us. However, as we approached, the horn of a steam engine rang out in the distance. Charles had come.
I got 7 Mac 11s, about 8, 38s, 9, 9, 10 Mac 10, the shit's never end.
After taking out about a third of his health, Charles fled, as predicted. In the heat of the battle, we'd overshot our destination a bit, and after a bit of backtracking, we find ourselves at Greg's house. Greg is a super genius and thinks that we can use the eggs to lure Charles into a fight to the death and defeat him for good. Furthermore, we also find this awesome lighthouse in need of repair. It turns out the miners and their families have been trapped on the island since Charles first emerged, and they've been trying to signal for help. This makes me wonder why it was so easy for Eugene to contact us at the beginning of the game, but whatever. After repairing the lighthouse, we meet John Smith, who has our next weapon mission. This is a neat quest that has us finding some explosives, placing them on a door, and then triggering this minecart to blow up another door. It's well designed in that it lets you see your goal and then forces you to puzzle out how to reach it, and I would have loved to see more quests like this in the final game. Ultimately though, that would have been a lot of work, and it's cool that stuff like this made its way into the game at all. This unlocks the rocket launcher, which is perhaps the most powerful weapon in the game. Upon acquiring it, I did the first thing that anyone would do. I checked to see if I could blow up the NPC who gave it to me. After completing all these quests, we had a large stretch of traversal ahead of us. At one point, I began to encounter Charles, but I was able to carefully route myself around him. You can't completely avoid him in all situations, nor should you be able to, but you can often mitigate the impact of his attacks and put yourself into a more advantageous position for his encounters. I did this one cool platforming mission that involved climbing this big structure to retrieve some paperwork at the top. While I was climbing, Charles began to stalk me from the cliffs around the tower. This was really cool. Watching him cruise along the horizon is really intimidating, and I got to see the way he dips in and out and looks for ways to get at you. Obviously, he couldn't reach me on the tower, and we played a little cat and mouse game before eventually he attacked. I waited for him to leave before sprinting back to the train. Unfortunately, Charles attacked me shortly after, and while I had my train, he was on the wrong side, and it took me a bit to realize that I could shoot through the front of my train. This was the only especially janky rail battle I experienced throughout the entire game, and I probably could have just turned the train around, taken a couple of hits, and then fought him normally. Fortunately, death in this game only loses you a couple of scraps, and thus I continued on. From here we meet Gale, a member of the Resistance, a group of miners that have been meeting in secret to topple Warren and destroy Charles. He gives us the key to the mine containing the next egg, which isn't too much trouble to retrieve. It's a more complex labyrinth than the first eggs, and there are more enemies running around, but you can still just kind of run in and grab it. Next we meet Gertrude, the best character in the game. Her late husband was a gunsmith who made a dope-ass gun that we can use to fight Charles, but Warren's men took it. We infiltrate their camp, blow everyone up, do our best to teabag them afterwards, and retrieve the gun.
Just do me one favor, will ya? If you do end up using it, name it Bob, in memory of my honey.
This rewards us with Bob, a big-ass gun. Awesome.
Bob was such a brave man. Much braver than you, I bet.
Our next story mission is from Paul at the Aranera Municipal Building, which seems to have been a sort of de facto headquarters for the Resistance.
While our main plan is to summon Charles into a duel and fight him to the death, we've devised a perfect trap as a precaution that may help defeat him. Go attach these remote explosives to each of the support pillars under the wood bridge out there.
We place the explosives on the bridge and enter the end game. We clean up the remaining optional and weapon missions. Charles attacks again, but we have mad scraps and guns now, so we just shoot his ass until he bails. Like a bitch. The final egg is deep in a mine that we can access via elevator. It almost reminds me of like an Elden Ring dungeon. I located the final egg, but I was spotted by the guards, and in my desperation, I fled to a locked box. It turns out you're invincible while lockpicking, so I was able to take my time, regain my composure, pick the lock, grab the red paint can, and quickly run to a conveniently located escape elevator that happened to be right next to me. It was actually kinda awesome. Of course, one of the guards chased me for like another 100 years again, which sucked, so I ran back to my train and introduced him to Bob. Hey asshole, Bob says hello. My Choo-Choo Charles playthrough was just under 3 hours long. I completed all the side quests, got all the weapons, and found all but 1 or 2 paint cans. I have like 94% of the achievements or something, so it's fair to say that it's about a 2 to 3 hour game if you're a completionist. If you just speedrun through the main quest, I'm sure you could beat it a lot more quickly, but that's not really an issue. Nobody buys a game like this to play it like that. Some people will inevitably complain that it isn't good value from a price to hours ratio, but I don't think it's fair to evaluate games like that. If Gavin had spent another couple of months adding 90 more minutes worth of fetch quests to the game, would that actually provide any more value? Would the game suddenly command a higher price point? Of course not. A horror game is good if it's fun and scary, and Choo-Choo Charles is an absolute blast. At its $20 price point, I think it's absolutely worth it. This is a big open world game with a fun, dynamic enemy. There is some replayability here, but even if you only intend to play it once, I think it more than justifies its cost.
Pickles!
With all 3 eggs and the explosive trap laid, I stealthily crept up to the shrine for our final showdown with Charles. I said I stealthily crept up to the shrine for our final showdown with Charles. I unlocked the door, approached the altar, and began to insert the eggs. First, the green one, then the blue, and then finally...
Step away from the shrine, stranger. You don't know what you're doing. Just put the egg down slowly and lay flat on the ground. You'll hurt far too many people if you follow through with whatever you're planning. No! No! You fool! You've doomed us all! I don't want to die!
The final showdown with Hell Charles is awesome. It's probably the single craziest moment in any indie horror game made in like the last couple of years. You remember this. Like, I just played Bendy in the Dark Revival, yet I can barely remember any of the game's big moments or set pieces. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach's final boss is downright awkward in how underwhelming and meh it is. Choo-Choo Charles, on the other hand, just explodes with this ridiculous final boss sequence, and it's just a blast. It's not the most mechanically complex thing ever. I mean, you shoot with one gun until it overheats, then you grab another. You know, maybe you stagger your shots to minimize those gun swaps and use your remaining scraps to repair your train, but it doesn't matter. This boss battle is spectacular and fun, and it's just a blast to play. I mean, you're watching it right now. Look how absolutely incredible this is. After dealing enough damage to Hell Charles, we cross the booby-trapped bridge and activate the trap. That was so fucking metal. Holy shit. After the credits roll, we're treated to a final scene showing that one egg remains. Or rather, a lot more than one egg remains. Choo-Choo Charles is my favorite indie horror game of the year. You simply must play it. Subscribe or you're going to die. Thanks for watching. After looting Tony Tittle's shack, I encountered the Pickle Lady. After looting Tony Tittle's shack, After looting Tony Tittle's shack, I encountered. After looting Tony Tittle's shack, we encounter. After looting Tony Tittle's shack, we encounter the Pickle Lady. We encounter the Pickle Lady. We encounter the Pickle Lady.
We encounter the Pickle Lady.